She's a criminal. She stole. That's what Lucien Ward, the cold, controlling head of the Ellison estate, told the police the moment the security footage hit his desk. And on the surface, he wasn't wrong. An unassuming housemaid did disappear with a millionaire's child in a $1 million supercar. But what he didn't say was why. Today's story is about a woman who once lost everything because she followed the rules, and now she's willing to break every one of them to stop history from repeating itself. What would make someone go that far? What secret pain drives a person to throw their entire life on the line for someone else's child? Stay with us, because the answers are deeper than you think. Before we begin, hit subscribe so you never miss the powerful true-style stories we share, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Now, take a deep breath. You're about to feel everything. The rain had stopped hours ago, but the streets of Atlanta still smelled like something broken. Damp cement, gasoline, and yesterday's heat lingered in the air like ghosts refusing to leave. From the window of the city bus, Nia Adesola watched the sidewalk blur by, her fingers clenched tightly around a tattered folder on her lap. Inside it, her past life, nursing certifications, letters of recommendation, an expired hospital ID card, and a death certificate with the name Ayana Adesola printed in sterile ink. Her daughter, 2 years gone. The pain hadn't dulled. It had settled deeper, like a splinter no one could reach. It reminded her every day that the rules she followed had cost her everything. The hospital where she once worked stood tall in the distance, its red emergency sign still glowing defiantly against the gray sky. She hadn't set foot there since the night Ayana died. That night, she had begged the charge nurse to let her leave early. Ayana's babysitter had called twice. Panicked. Hives. Difficulty breathing. Nia had known. She'd known it was anaphylaxis before the sitter could say the word. But the ER was full. Her supervisor had barked, "We're short-staffed. You leave now. You're done here." She'd stayed, followed the rules, trusted the system. By the time she got home, Ayana was gone. Now Nia cleans other people's floors. The city bus jolted to a halt, pulling her from memory. She stepped down onto the upscale pavement of Buckhead, the Ellison estate rising ahead like a glass and steel fortress. Security cameras watched in silence. Iron gates whispered open. She walked through them not as a guest, not as staff, with dignity, but as a shadow. The side entrance accepted her without a word, just like every morning. Inside, the house breathed wealth. The air smelled of lemon oil and something imported. Every corner gleamed. The walls were white, sterile, and high enough to echo. She moved like muscle memory. Polish, straighten, clean. She said nothing. That was how she survived here. Lucien Ward was already in the foyer, back ramrod straight, eyes hard with control. At 55, he dressed like power and moved like judgment. He didn't need to shout. His silences cut deeper. "You're late," he said, even though she wasn't. "Apologies," she answered, calm and practiced. He stared a second too long, then turned. That was their rhythm. She climbed the stairs, each step absorbing the echo of her past. At the top, golden morning light spilled across the hallway. She knocked softly on the door to the boys' room. Inside, Micah Ellison sat cross-legged, cradling a toy spaceship. 5 years old, curious eyes, and a smile that still believed in people. "Miss Nia, you missed pancakes," he said, launching into her arms. She hugged him, holding just tight enough to silence the grief. "Guess I'll need to earn back your trust," she joked. He giggled, burying his face in her shoulder. With him, she remembered how to breathe. Caleb Ellison hadn't been home last night. Again, a man who built an empire but forgot bedtime stories. He left behind a son and a house filled with schedules, glass, and Lucien. Nia had learned to compensate for his absence with love that Micah could recognize. Yet today, something was off. Micah blinked slower. His energy flickered like a weak signal. She brushed his curls back and asked, "Rocket Man, you good?" He nodded, but his voice was hoarse. She watched him, noticed, remembered. Downstairs, Lucien was arranging flowers like they were military strategy. "Micah looks a little warm today," she said cautiously. Lucien didn't look up. "Children always look warm when they don't want chores. Your responsibilities are in the linen closet," she pressed. He mentioned chest tightness. Now he looked cold, dismissive. He has a doctor. You're not it. Do your job. Her jaw tightened. There was no use fighting him. Not here. Back in the bedroom, she watched Micah lie down mid-play. His fingers trembled. His breathing shallowed. She knelt beside him. "Tell me exactly how you feel," she whispered. "My throat hurts, and I feel floaty," he murmured. Her heart froze. The signs were undeniable. This wasn't a cold. This was the same shadow that had stolen her daughter. She stood, pulled out her phone. The estate's emergency line? Voicemail. She called 911, estimated arrival, 15 minutes, too long. She bolted from the room, stormed into the kitchen. "The intercom's dead. Micah's condition is serious. He needs immediate medical attention," she said. Lucian raised an eyebrow. "You will not create chaos over a sneeze." Her hands shook. He could go into respiratory failure. Lucian's tone turned to steel. "If you touch him again without permission, I will see you removed." For a second, she stared at him, and in that moment, she saw not a man, but a lock like the one that barred her from Ayanna. She ran. Micah was barely conscious. She scooped him up, heart thundering. His body burned in her arms. No hesitation now, just motion. Out the side door, into the garage. A wall of gleaming steel and silence. And there it was, the McLaren 720S, orange like fire. She had never been allowed within 5 feet. She didn't pause. Micah's thumb unlocked the door. She placed him gently inside, buckled him in, and slid into the driver's seat. The cockpit hummed around her like a warning. She had not driven in over a year, but her hands remembered. Keyless start, paddle shifters. She inhaled once, deep, then slammed the pedal. Tires screamed as the gates parted. The car flew into the street. Her heart stayed behind. The McLaren tore through the morning traffic like a scream. Nia's hands gripped the wheel tighter than she'd ever held a scalpel, each fingertip pressing against the suede like she was praying through friction. Her foot barely eased off the accelerator, weaving between cars that loomed too close, too slow. The city blurred, but her focus sharpened. Every street sign, every honk, every flickering light on the dashboard registered in her brain like a triage list she couldn't afford to get wrong. Beside her, Micah wheezed, his tiny chest stuttering like a misfiring engine. She reached for his hand, not taking her eyes off the road. "Stay with me, baby. You're okay. You're going to be okay." Her voice cracked, but she held the note, like holding pressure on a wound that wouldn't stop bleeding. The ghost of Ayanna whispered from the back of her mind, but she didn't let it in. Not now. Not again. As she exited onto North Avenue, a red light glared ahead. She hesitated, then ran it. A horn blared from the left. Tires screeched behind her. She didn't flinch. Her eyes were locked on the glowing red cross of the hospital sign 3 blocks away. Behind her, chaos had already started. Lucian stood in the center of the Ellison driveway, phone pressed to his ear, voice icy and loud. "Mr. Ellison, the McLaren has been stolen. Yes, with your son inside. By the housemaid." He didn't stumble on the words. He didn't soften them. His satisfaction was subtle, layered beneath his urgency. He'd always seen Nia as a threat to his control, a woman who refused to shrink. Now she had crossed the line. Perfect. He barked orders to staff, summoned private security, and called the police himself. Each command is calculated, precise. This wasn't panic. This was leverage. Caleb Ellison, mid-presentation at a tech expo downtown, stared at his phone in disbelief. "She what?" The boardroom fell into stunned silence. Screens froze. PR managers blinked. Caleb stood up slowly, color draining from his face. He left without a word, his footsteps echoing off marble floors. His driver scrambled to keep up. The words stolen, McLaren, and Micah pounded in his skull, but none louder than Maid. He barely remembered her name. Back on the road, Nia made the final turn. The hospital loomed in full view now, glass and concrete towering like salvation. She sped past the drop-off zone, veered sharply into the emergency entrance, and slammed the brakes. The McLaren skidded, tires screaming, parking across 2 lanes. She leapt out, yanked the door open, and cried, "Help! He's not breathing. Somebody, please. Her voice was raw, pure need. Nurses ran. A gurney rolled. One look at Micah's limp frame, and the triage nurse didn't ask questions. They pulled him out. Oxygen mask, monitors, defibrillator paddles standing by. The ER swallowed him whole. Nia stood frozen. Her chest heaved. Her palms were damp, smeared with sweat, and something worse. Fear. She didn't know if he'd live. She didn't know if she'd ever see him again. But she knew one thing. She hadn't hesitated. Not this time. Not like before. A shout snapped her back. "Ma'am, step away from the vehicle. Hands where I can see them." A police officer approached, weapon holstered, but hand ready. She turned slowly. Her voice was barely audible. "I didn't steal it. I saved him." But the cuffs came anyway. Cold metal. Unforgiving. They locked behind her back as she watched the hospital doors close. Inside the ER, the trauma team moved fast. Dr. Hartley, sharp-eyed and calm, called out vitals and meds while nurses worked in tandem. Epinephrine shot, IV fluids. Oxygen saturation is rising. Micah's small body twitched once, then again. The machines beeped a little steadier, a little stronger. The nurse at his side whispered, "We got him." In the holding room, Nia sat hunched on a steel bench, hands cuffed behind her, uniform damp with sweat and road dust. Her thoughts spiraled. Did she wait too long? Should she have fought harder upstairs? Would Caleb listen, or would Lucian's version become truth? Her heart ached, but not just for Micah, for the memory of Ayanna, for the life she might have had, for every rule that ever told her to stay small. Footsteps echoed outside. She lifted her head. Through the glass, she saw Caleb, tie undone, suit wrinkled, eyes wild. He stopped short at the trauma room window. Inside, Micah lay still, breathing now but pale, tubes trailing from his nose. Caleb's face crumpled, his hand pressed to the glass like a man touching reality for the first time. A doctor stepped out. He had a rapid onset allergic reaction, minutes away from respiratory arrest. He made it because someone got him here in time. Caleb swallowed. "Who?" The nurse answered. "Your housemaid, Nia." Lucian appeared behind him. "She endangered your son. She took your car. She disobeyed every protocol." Caleb turned to him slowly. His eyes had changed. He walked past without speaking, down the hall, into the holding room. Nia looked up, lips cracked. "Is he?" she started. Caleb cut her off with a nod. "He's okay. Because of you." Her shoulders collapsed. Tears came like surrender. Caleb turned to the officers. "Unlock her. Now." They hesitated. "Now," he repeated. The cuffs fell away. She rubbed her wrists like reclaiming ownership of her body. Outside, cameras already flashed. Reporters circled like sharks. Lucian stepped forward, ready to control the narrative. But Caleb stepped in front of him. "Not today." Later on the hospital steps, Caleb stood beside Nia in front of the press. No speech prepared, no PR script, just truth. "She broke the rules, but she saved my son, and I'll never forget that." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Caleb looked at her, voice soft but resolute. "From now on, Nia Adesola is not a maid. She is Micah's full-time caregiver. And more than that, she's the head of our new Child Wellness Foundation." Flashbulbs erupted, but Nia heard none of it. All she heard was Micah's laugh in her memory and a whisper that maybe, just maybe. Ayanna was proud. The hospital room smelled like antiseptic and the faint sweetness of plastic tubing. Nia sat by Micah's bedside, her eyes never leaving his face. Even as his breath grew steadier, his color returned, and the monitors blinked with comforting rhythm. Her body was still, but inside 1,000 questions collided. Had she done enough? Had she pushed too far? What would happen when the camera stopped flashing, when the headlines shifted to someone else's crisis? She reached for Micah's hand, still small and warm, and squeezed gently. He stirred, murmured her name, then drifted back into the soft fog of recovery. Relief washed over her, but it didn't last, because standing outside the room, watching through the glass, Lucienne Ward wasn't done. 2 days later, the Ellison estate gleamed with its usual polish, but something in the air had shifted. Nia stepped out of a sleek black SUV Caleb had sent for her, now dressed not in a maid's uniform, but a dark blouse and slacks that fit her frame. She looked different, felt different. Yet as she crossed the marble threshold, silence wrapped around her like static. The staff glanced her way, then back down. Conversations died when she entered a room. The air wasn't cold. It was sharp, like it had been waiting for her to breathe wrong. Lucian greeted her at the main hall with a tight smile. "Miss Adesola," he said, crisp and controlled. "Welcome back." He extended a hand that she ignored. Instead, she nodded once, eyes unwavering. "I'm here for Micah." Lucian's smile faltered for half a second, then returned. "Of course. He's eager to see you. But first, Mr. Ellison asked you to stop by the study, alone." She hesitated. Caleb had said nothing to her about a meeting, but she knew better than to show doubt in front of Lucian. She walked past him, heart pounding louder than her heels on the floor. The study door was ajar. Inside, Caleb sat behind his massive oak desk, eyes red-rimmed, phone set to silent beside a coffee gone cold. He looked up. "Micah's asking for you." She nodded. "Is everything okay?" He exhaled hard. "Yes. No, I don't know. The press has backed off for now, but I've been hearing things." He paused. "About you." She stiffened. "From Lucian?" "Not just him." There it was. The first ripple, the first crack. Nia kept her voice level. "What kind of things?" He looked down. "That you didn't follow protocol, that you endangered Micah by not calling me directly, that you acted emotionally." Nia's jaw tightened. He couldn't breathe, Caleb. There wasn't time for protocol. "I know," he rubbed his temples. "But you need to know Lucian's compiling a report. Private investigation, interviews with staff, timestamps, everything. He's building something. A case against me." Caleb didn't deny it. Nia stepped back. The warmth she'd felt since the press conference evaporated. "You said I saved him." "You did." He looked haunted. "But saving him and keeping him, that's different. Lucian's pushing for full-time medical staff, a live-in pediatric nurse. He says it's for Micah's safety." Nia swallowed hard. "So you're asking me to step aside?" "No." Caleb stood. "I'm asking you to be careful. Watch what you say, what you do. He's waiting for you to slip." She left the study without another word, her breath tight in her chest. This wasn't over. It had only just begun. Micah lit up the moment she entered his room. "Miss Nia!" he cried, arms open. She rushed to him, kissed his forehead, and let the fear drain away just long enough to hold him. But even as they laughed, even as he showed her his new robot toy and whispered he missed her more than pancakes, she noticed the subtle shifts. A new camera in the corner, a clipboard near the door. Lucien's eyes were watching from the hallway. She kept smiling. That night, after Micah fell asleep, Nia walked the estate grounds alone. She needed air, needed silence to think. But as she passed the staff garage, she noticed something odd. The McLaren, still there, dented from the emergency stop, but untouched, unmoved, like evidence. And then she heard it, voices behind the adjacent service wall. Lucian's voice, calm, sharp. "She's reckless. You saw what she did. Next time, there may not be a miracle." Another voice, a woman, one of the household staff, shaky. She saved him, Mr. Ward. She endangered him first." Nia stepped back into the shadows, heart racing. The whisper of betrayal had begun. But it wasn't just Lucian. She knew that now. He was planting seeds. Doubt, fear, division. And the soil, the staff, the people who had once looked her in the eye. The next morning, while reviewing Micah's new meal plan, she noticed something strange. Walnuts. He was allergic. Severely. She double-checked the kitchen chart. It hadn't been updated. She flagged it immediately, brought it to the head chef. He blinked. I didn't see this." Later, she found a bottle of antihistamines placed too high in the medicine cabinet to reach in a rush. She checked Micah's school backpack. It was missing his epinephrine auto-injector. Every detail tightened like a noose. Coincidence or sabotage? She reported it to Caleb that evening. He listened, brows furrowed. You think someone's trying to hurt Micah? She didn't blink. I think someone wants me to look like I'm failing. He didn't respond immediately. Then he whispered, prove it. Nia knew then that this wasn't about saving a child anymore. It was about protecting him from shadows dressed as caretakers, and protecting herself from a system that still didn't trust the woman who broke the rules to save a life. The rain began as a whisper against the windows, barely more than mist, but Nia felt the dread in her chest before the sky even darkened. Something was wrong. She had felt it in Micah's breathing. Slightly wheezy, not yet dangerous, but hinting at something deeper, something stirring. His cheeks were flushed. His energy, usually explosive by breakfast, seemed muted. When she placed her palm to his forehead, the warmth wasn't feverish, but her instincts screamed otherwise. She knew this path, had walked it once before. Time had betrayed her then. It was about to do it again. The estate was unusually quiet. The usual chatter of staff had been replaced by hushed tones and stiff glances. Nia carried Micah down to the kitchen, her arms wrapped tightly around his small body. He clung to her like a child, half asleep, head resting against her collarbone. She laid him gently in one of the breakfast nook chairs and turned to grab some water and check his allergy kit. But the kit wasn't where it should be. She rifled through drawers. Nothing. The small red bag, usually clipped to his school backpack, was missing. A sharp knock startled her. She turned to find Lucian standing in the doorway, his arms crossed. Is something the matter, Miss Adesola? His injector is gone, she said, her voice tight. It's always here. Did someone move it? Lucian stepped in slowly, his eyes calm but sharp. It was outdated. I had it removed for replacement. He didn't blink. A new one is due to arrive tomorrow. You didn't tell me, she snapped, unable to mask the rising panic. I informed Mr. Ellison of all medical equipment updates. Not me? The one responsible for his life? Lucian's expression didn't shift. I was under the impression you were still adjusting to your role. Nia stepped closer, her voice low, deadly. You removed his only line of defense without telling me, knowing he's high risk? The child is stable. You're overreacting. But even as he said it, Micah coughed behind her, a small, hollow sound that made the air crackle with warning. Nia turned, rushed back to his side. His breathing was shallow now. His eyelids fluttered. Panic surged. She grabbed the phone in the kitchen, dialed 911. The line rang. No pickup. She tried again. Busy. She grabbed the estate's emergency intercom. Silent. Lucian watched her, unmoved. The network's undergoing scheduled maintenance, he said coolly. You shut down the intercom during a week Micah is home full-time? Mr. Ellison approved the system update. Rage lit her blood. She scooped Micah into her arms and ran, not walked, past Lucian, down the hallway, her shoes slipping on polished tile. Lucian called out behind her. She didn't hear the words. The garage door opened at her touch. The McLaren sat under low lights, untouched since that first night. It glowed like a warning sign, but Nia didn't hesitate. She laid Micah gently in the passenger seat. His head lolled sideways. She buckled him in, hands trembling. Turned the ignition. Nothing. The dash blinked. Key not detected, she screamed, ran back into the house. Lucian was there, waiting, keys dangling in one hand. Return to the kitchen, Miss Adesola. You're escalating this unnecessarily. Give me the key. I'm calling Mr. Ellison. Call him, but I'm taking that car. Lucian stepped back slightly. If you assault me... She didn't wait. She lunged, grabbed the key fob, and shoved past him. He tried to grab her arm, but missed. She sprinted back, the door slamming behind her. This was not about rules anymore. This was not about roles or permission. This was survival. The McLaren roared to life. She pulled out so fast the garage camera shorted in its swivel. As she tore down the long driveway, Micah whimpered beside her. Stay with me, baby. Just a little longer, she whispered, wiping tears with her sleeve. She dialed Caleb's number. No answer. She tried again. Still nothing. The clouds had thickened above, mirroring the storm inside her. She ran a red light, weaving through traffic, sirens already rising in the distance. Her phone buzzed, a call from Caleb. She picked up. Nia, where the hell? Micah's in crisis. Lucian removed his EPA pen. I'm en route to the ER. What? No time to explain. Be there in 5. The call dropped. Her knuckles whitened on the wheel. At the ER entrance, chaos erupted the moment she skidded to a halt. Nurses ran. One of them recognized her. We need oxygen. Crash cart. Micah was lifted out. Nia stumbled from the car, chest heaving. A nurse turned. He's crashing. If you got him here 5 minutes later. She didn't need the end of that sentence. Caleb arrived as they were rushing Micah into trauma. He looked at Nia. She looked like a ghost. Lucian did what? He knew. He took everything. No one helped. Caleb clenched his jaw, pulled out his phone. He's done. The hospital room was quiet except for the faint hum of machines and the rhythmic beeping of Micah's heart monitor. Nia sat in the corner, her back stiff against the plastic chair, hands folded tightly in her lap. Her eyes never left the boy's face. Pale, still, but alive. Each shallow breath he took reminded her that there was no room for error anymore. Not 1 second. Not one oversight. The world had already tried to steal him twice. She wouldn't allow a third. Caleb stood by the window, his phone pressed to his ear. His voice was low but sharp, slicing through whatever excuses the man on the other end was feeding him. I want Lucian suspended immediately. Full access revoked. Clear security logs. Get me everything, every conversation, every order he gave. He ended the call and turned. The lines on his face were deeper now. Guilt, fury, and something else. Resolve. He looked at Nia. You were right. He's been documenting everything. Waiting for you to slip. Emails, incident reports, and even false witness statements from staff he bribed. I should have seen it. Nia's voice was flat, tired. But you didn't. Caleb walked closer. We can't undo what's happened, but we can make sure it doesn't happen again. He's out, I promise. Nia didn't respond. She turned back to Micah. He stirred slightly. Caleb took the cue and stepped out of the room. In the hallway, a nurse intercepted him. Doctor needs a word. Downstairs, Dr. Hartley met him with a tight expression. Micah's improving, but the triggers are intensifying. Whatever he's been exposed to isn't just a random allergen. It's systemic. His immune system is in a heightened state, and it's staying there. We believe he's being exposed repeatedly. Caleb blinked. You're saying he's being poisoned? Dr. Hartley nodded grimly. Microdoses, small, steady, deliberate. It mimics food allergies, environmental responses. Very difficult to trace, but over time, it breaks the body. The words were a blow to the chest. Caleb staggered back slightly, the hallway tilting around him. Someone was doing this. Not negligence. Malice. Upstairs, Nia watched Micah sleep, her heart pounding. Something gnawed at her memory. The food. His water. That odd smell in his room last week. The maid who left suddenly. The way Lucian always managed to deflect. She stood abruptly. Pushed open the door. She needed answers. Now. As she stormed out of the room, she collided with Caleb mid-hallway. His face mirrored hers, fear masked as fury. She grabbed his arm. He's being dosed, isn't he? He nodded. We need to move, now. Together they rushed out of the hospital, stepping into the cold morning fog. The McLaren was still parked, lights off, hood wet with dew. Caleb tossed her the key. Drive, I'll explain. They raced back to the Ellison estate, tires hissing against wet asphalt. Caleb briefed her between sharp turns. Lucian had help. Someone on the kitchen staff. One of the nannies. We don't know who yet, but if they realize we're onto them, they'll erase every trace. Nia gripped the wheel tighter. Then we don't give them time. The estate loomed ahead. The gate recognized the car and slid open. They didn't wait for the full rise. Nia punched through, clipping the edge. The sound of metal scraping metal echoed behind them. Inside, staff froze as the McLaren screeched to a stop in the driveway. Nia jumped out before the engine died. Caleb followed. They didn't knock. Lucian's office door was unlocked. It swung open to reveal a bare room. Drawers open, papers missing. The walls felt colder. He's gone, Caleb said. But Nia shook her head. Not yet. She turned on her heel, rushing toward the kitchen. The chef stepped back as she entered. "Where's Ava?" she barked. The sous chef stuttered. She, she left half an hour ago. Said she had a family emergency." Nia turned to Caleb. "That's your mole." He nodded. "We need to find her." She was already moving again, flying out the back door. The staff parking area was empty, except for a blue Toyota peeling off at the far end. Nia didn't think. She ran back to the McLaren. Caleb barely shut the passenger door before she hit the gas. They tailed the Toyota onto the highway. Traffic was thick. Ava's car weaved dangerously, trying to lose them. Nia pushed the McLaren harder. The engine screamed in protest, but she didn't blink. Not once. Every red light was a dare. Every lane shift was a challenge. They were closing in. Ava tried an off-ramp. Nia followed. The road narrowed. A construction zone loomed. "She's trying to shake us," Caleb muttered. Nia didn't answer. Her mind was razor sharp. No more hesitation. No more waiting. She floored it, passing two cars on the shoulder, barely missing a barrier. The McLaren surged ahead, pulling alongside the Toyota. Caleb rolled down the window. "Pull over! You're endangering a child's life." Ava's face was pale, her eyes wild. She swerved. Nia reacted instantly, yanking the wheel to avoid a collision. The McLaren spun but didn't crash. Nia brought it to a stop with expert control. Caleb leapt out, chasing Ava's car as it screeched into an alley. But too late, it vanished. Back in the car, Nia slammed her fist against the wheel. "She's gone! But now we know who." Caleb's chest rose and fell. "We alert the police. Lock down every route. She can't hide for long." They looked at each other, partners in a race against silence, corruption, and death. But for the first time, Nia didn't feel alone. The wind had shifted, not outside, but inside the walls of the Ellison estate. Nia could feel it in the glances of the staff, in the way conversations stopped when she entered a room, and in the wary looks even Caleb received now. The house was no longer neutral ground. It was a battleground disguised in glass and marble, where trust had become a currency no one could afford to spend. She stood by Micah's bedside, adjusting the edge of his blanket as his chest rose and fell steadily. The machines were quieter today. His skin held more color. Yet in the pit of her stomach, Nia knew peace was temporary. The poison might have been discovered, but its source still ran free. Ava had disappeared, Lucian was in hiding, and someone, maybe more than one, had helped them do it. Downstairs, Caleb stood with Detective Ramos, a sharp-eyed woman with a voice like gravel and a record that didn't tolerate loopholes. She flipped through her notepad. So she had access to the food, medical supplies, and schedules. Ava's name shows up on every visitor log for the last 6 months. Not a coincidence. Caleb nodded. "What about Lucian?" Ramos narrowed her eyes. "He wired funds offshore last week. Multiple accounts. He's not just fleeing, he's covering tracks. And frankly, unless someone steps forward inside your house, we might lose him." Upstairs, Nia glanced at her phone. A message blinked from an unknown number. "You think this is over? You think you're safe because they clapped for you?" He wasn't the only target. Her breath caught. The screen dimmed as her grip tightened. She didn't tell Caleb. Not yet. Instead, she slipped the phone into her pocket and walked straight to the nursery. She checked everything. The toys, the sheets, the medicine drawers. Nothing out of place. But her gut screamed otherwise. Something was wrong, or about to be. Later that afternoon, the board of directors arrived. 10 men and women in tailored suits and tight smiles, all seated around a polished conference table like vultures watching a dying lion. Nia wasn't supposed to be there. She came anyway, standing silently at the back of the room. Her presence unsettled them. Caleb noticed but said nothing. The chairman cleared his throat. "Mr. Ellison, the media attention surrounding your former housemaid has drawn concern. We need assurance that the family brand and its subsidiaries are not exposed to liability." Caleb's jaw clenched. "She saved my son." The chairman didn't blink. "Yes, and broke laws doing it. Vigilantism might win public favor short term, but our legal teams are worried. Investors don't like chaos." Nia stepped forward. "Is it chaos to act when a child is dying? Is it a liability to choose conscience over protocol when lives are at stake?" Silence hit the room like thunder. A younger board member stood. She's right. If our brand doesn't stand for doing what's right, what does it stand for? The chairman frowned but didn't argue. Caleb leaned forward. You want a statement? Here's one. We're launching the Guardian Protocol. Every household staff member will undergo emergency training, funded, certified, and supported. No one will be punished again for saving a life. Nia felt the tension shift. Some heads nodded, others remained stiff, but the line had been drawn. That evening, Caleb found Nia on the back terrace overlooking the garden. Sunset painted the sky in bruised orange and tired gold. He handed her a cup of tea. She took it with a nod. You didn't have to speak up in there, he said. She sipped. Yes, I did. They weren't just questioning you. They were questioning every person who's ever had to break a rule to do what's right. He nodded, then hesitated. There's something I haven't told you. Lucian left a file behind, encrypted. We cracked it this morning. Her eyes met his sharply. What's inside? Caleb's voice dropped. It wasn't just about Micah. There's a list, children, all with medical anomalies, all from the families Lucian had access to. Ava's name is on everyone. The tea turned bitter in her throat. How long? Years, he whispered. I think we've stumbled into something much bigger. Before she could respond, her phone buzzed again. Another unknown message. You've bought time, but you'll never win the whole clock. She didn't flinch. She showed Caleb. He read it twice, then looked at her. What now? She straightened. Now, we stop running defense. That night, Nia sat in the dark, Micah's hand in hers, thinking about laws and lines, about the rules she broke to save a life, and the rules others used to destroy them. Conscience had a price, but silence costs more. And tomorrow she'd make sure the world knew the difference. The question burned louder than any siren. Who broke the law? Nia asked herself that again as she stood under the blinding lights of the courtroom foyer, her breath caught between defiance and dread. The press had returned like wolves to a scent they couldn't resist. But this time, they weren't asking about her driving a McLaren. They were asking if the people behind the walls of power had been hiding crimes behind polished doors and hollow policies. Inside, the hearing room buzzed with tension. A special inquiry had been opened following the release of Lucian's encrypted files. Caleb had submitted the evidence, risking reputation and legacy, but refusing to protect the rot. Nia sat behind him, her posture upright, her hands clasped, her eyes unblinking. On the far side of the chamber sat Ava's attorney, flanked by silence and a glare that never wavered. Detective Ramos took the stand first. She spoke with clipped precision. Lucian Ward's financial transfers were layered through 8 shell accounts, all tracing back to Horizon Research, a biotech subsidiary funded by the Ellison Foundation. Murmurs rose. Caleb's hands curled into fists. Ramos continued. Children were enrolled under false wellness programs, then subjected to unapproved drug testing. Ava Asher coordinated logistics under Lucian's direction. These were not accidents. These were decisions. Nia felt her pulse slam against her skin. She remembered the odd deliveries, the security cameras Lucian had insisted be turned off on certain days. All of it made sense now, in a sickening, too-late way. Ramos presented photos, documents, case histories. Then she nodded to the back of the room. A woman in scrubs stood. Her voice cracked slightly as she said, I worked with Ava. I kept quiet because I was afraid. But what they did to those children, it wasn't medicine. It was manipulation. Caleb rose next. The room hushed. I didn't know, and that ignorance is my shame to carry. But I will not allow my silence to protect anyone. Not anymore. Ava's lawyer countered quickly. My client was following protocol under institutional contracts. She was not the mastermind. She's being scapegoated to protect deeper interests. But Nia had heard enough. She stood. Your client looked me in the eyes while slipping poison into a child's food. That's not protocol. That's evil. The room erupted. The judge slammed her gavel. Order! Later in the hallway, a camera crew cornered Nia. Do you feel vindicated? She hesitated. No, because the children can't speak for themselves. Justice isn't a feeling, it's an action, and we're not done yet. Meanwhile, Micah watched the live stream from a hospital tablet. He turned to his nurse. Miss Nia is brave, huh? The nurse smiled softly. Braver than most people ever get to be. Back at the estate, Nia returned to a strange quiet. Caleb followed behind her, silent until the front door closed. You didn't have to stand up, he said. Yes, I did, she replied. Because the truth doesn't stand up by itself. The air in the house felt heavier now, as if all its history had surfaced in one violent breath. Nia walked through the kitchen, her eyes lingering on the spice rack where Ava used to adjust bottles with obsessive care. Then she reached the back hallway. The door to Lucian's office stood ajar. Inside, untouched since he fled, lay files, pictures, and a single USB drive. She pocketed it. That night, she and Caleb opened it together. Inside, video footage. Children in observation rooms. Lab notes, voice memos. One entry chilled her. Lucian's voice, flat and cold. The key is fear. When parents fear time running out, they'll sign anything. Nia's hand curled into a fist. He played God with their lives. Micah's voice echoed in her mind again. Braver than most. She thought of Ayana. Of all the children without names in that footage, this wasn't about saving face. It was about rewriting the rules. Because laws had failed them, but conscience could not. As morning broke, Nia stepped onto the front lawn. Reporters waited again. This time, she didn't flinch. She walked forward and took the mic. Everyone keeps asking if I broke the law. But what if the law was broken long before I stepped in? What if it's not about who violated policy, but who violated people? Gasps, flashes, and then silence, because they finally understood. The rain pounded the pavement like war drums as Nia stood beneath the courthouse steps, her breath steaming in the cold dusk air. Cameras flashed around her, but she didn't flinch. Behind her, Lucian was being led into a black SUV in handcuffs, his face pale, mask of control shattered. The courtroom had erupted just an hour earlier, but outside the storm was only beginning. Nia wasn't retreating. She wasn't even pausing. She had too much to do. There were still pieces of truth scattered across the city, and she had no intention of letting them be buried. Inside the hospital, Caleb was pacing the corridor outside Micah's room, the boy asleep with a tube still in his nose, color finally returning to his cheeks. Caleb's mind wasn't on the hospital anymore. It was at the press conference that he had just announced for the next morning, where the Ellison Foundation would be restructured and renamed, the Nia Wells Initiative. He hadn't told her yet. She wouldn't like it, but she deserved it. She had dismantled everything built on silence, and somehow still walked forward, flames behind her and fire in her eyes. Nia arrived home to find a stranger waiting by her building, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and strong posture. Her name was Dr. Clarice Morgan, former chief of pediatrics at a private institution, until Lucian's network drove her out for whistleblowing. I saw what you did in that courtroom, Clarice said, and I want in. There are more children, more cases buried, more systems to crack open. Nia listened quietly. She didn't trust easily, but she saw something in the woman's stare. Familiar grief, familiar fury, and the kind of resolve that never asked permission. The next morning, the press swarmed the hospital lawn. Caleb stood tall, shoulders squared. Nia, in a dark coat, didn't want to speak. But when the first reporter asked, "Do you regret breaking the law?" she stepped forward. Her voice didn't rise. It cut. I regret waiting as long as I did. I regret thinking silence was the safer choice. But what I'll never regret is doing what was right, even when it cost me everything. The crowd fell into stunned silence. Caleb placed a hand on her shoulder, but Nia didn't move. She didn't need support. She needed space to run. That afternoon, a letter arrived at the Ellison estate, anonymous, typed. She only scratched the surface. Follow the trail to Redstone Labs. Inside was a flash drive. Caleb handed it to Nia without a word. She plugged it into her laptop in the security office. What she saw made her jaw tighten. Documents, doses, names, children, patterns. Lucian wasn't working alone, and Redstone wasn't just a lab. It was a shield for corporate malpractice, with federal ties. It was bigger than they thought. By nightfall, Nia had a list, addresses, names, former nurses, parents, even a lab tech who disappeared in 2019. She didn't sleep. She barely blinked. She called Clarice. Then she called another number she hadn't used in years. Detective Hayes, the only cop who'd believed her during Ayana's collapse. He remembered, and he was still waiting for a reason to burn bridges of his own. They met under the dim yellow lights of a parking garage, where justice was no longer blind, just chained. Hayes took one look at the files and said, "You're not wrong, but you're not safe." Back at the hospital, Ava returned, hair smoothed, smile restored. She had new counsel, a team funded by investors who wanted Lucian's silence. She offered a public apology, staged, hollow. Nia watched it on a monitor without blinking. Ava spoke of misunderstandings, of betrayal, of moving forward with healing. But her eyes never met the camera. Her voice never cracked. When the press asked Nia for comment, she simply said, "Some people don't deserve another microphone." Later that week, Nia drove Caleb and Micah out of the city. They stayed in a cabin in the woods, quiet, away from reporters. Micah, holding her hand tighter than ever, was laughing again, building Lego towers, sleeping through the night. Caleb made tea, often watching Nia from the kitchen, unsure what to say. She had changed, not broken, just sharpened, hardened like glass forged from fire. That night, while Micah slept, Nia finally spoke. "I don't want a statue or a title. I want a system that works. For every child." Caleb nodded. "Then let's build it. You lead, I'll follow." 2 days later, they were back. Redstone's lawyers sent a cease and desist. They were stalling. Nia didn't stall. She met with Dr. Clarice and Hayes in a church basement. The plan wasn't just to expose, it was to protect. Every whistleblower, every victim, every piece of data. She coordinated digital backups, legal filings, and media partners ready to go public if anything happened to her. She wasn't slowing down. She had no brakes left, only purpose. Clarice stared at her across the room and whispered, "You're not just fighting back, you're redefining the war." Nia answered, "I'm not here to make noise. I'm here to make history." And this time she wasn't running alone. Rain fell in slow, shimmering curtains outside the courthouse as Nia stepped into the light. Her heels clicked against the wet pavement, her face calm but unreadable. Crowds had gathered not just for the verdict, but for her. News vans lined the street, reporters jostled, microphones thrust like weapons. Yet her eyes weren't on them. They were on Micah, safe in Caleb's arms, clapping small hands without truly understanding the weight of this moment. Beside them stood Clarice and Detective Hayes, silent witnesses to the final chapter of a war they had all survived. Inside, the judge's gavel struck once, final and decisive. Lucian Ward had been sentenced. 20 years for conspiracy, reckless endangerment, evidence tampering, and obstruction of justice. The courtroom murmured as Lucian was led away, his face hollow, jaw tight. Ava never returned after her arrest. Redstone's license was suspended indefinitely, but the cameras didn't linger on them. They turned to Nia. Caleb reached for her hand as they exited. She let him hold it for a breath, then gently slipped free. There were things she had to say, and they couldn't be said in anyone else's shadow. On the courthouse steps, a podium waited. Flash bulbs flared like fireflies. A reporter shouted her name. Another begged for a statement. Nia stepped forward, her voice like steel wrapped in silk. "I am not a hero because I broke the rules," she began. "I'm not a hero because I drove a McLaren or saved a billionaire's son. I'm here because years ago, I held my child in my arms as the system told me to wait, to obey, to let the protocol decide if she lived or died. And Ayana never got that chance." A gasp rippled through the crowd. Clarice, standing to the side, bowed her head. Hayes looked straight ahead, unmoving. Caleb's eyes glazed over. Nia continued, her words sharpened by memory. "You called me reckless, a thief, a maid. But what I did, what I had to do, was act. Because action saves lives. Titles don't, suits don't, red tape doesn't. In the moments that matter, it's conscience, not credentials, that draws the line between life and loss." She paused, letting the silence settle. Then she added, "And I will never again ask permission to do what is right." A beat, then applause. It started slow. One person, then another, until the courthouse steps thundered with clapping, a release of breath held too long. Nia stepped down as the cameras swarmed, but her direction wasn't back toward the estate. It was toward the press van, where a producer from a major network waited. She'd been offered a deal, not for a book, not for a film, for a platform, one that would amplify stories like hers and like Ayana's, and ensure silence never buried another child's chance again. That night, she didn't return to the guest house. She stood in the small apartment she once called home, its peeling paint and familiar chill oddly comforting. On the wall still hung Ayana's drawing, yellowed at the edges. Nia touched it softly, then turned to her laptop. An email from Clarice blinked. The Wellness Foundation board had approved Nia as their lead advocate and co-director. She smiled, tears lining her lashes, but didn't fall. This wasn't the end. This was the ignition. Micah's voice echoed from a recent video Caleb had sent her. He was smiling, vibrant again, pointing at a screen. "Miss Nia made me strong." That alone was worth every scar. The next morning, Nia sat at a city panel hearing, facing lawmakers and civic leaders. She wasn't there to be honored. She was there to challenge the system. Her statement wasn't flowery, it was fire. If your rules can't protect a 5-year-old, then your rules need rewriting. A silence followed, thick with reckoning. Someone finally asked what she proposed. She laid out a plan: emergency override protocols, trauma training for domestic staff, pediatric responsiveness courses subsidized by state funds. It was bold, radical even, but it was heard. She exited the chamber not as a speaker, but as a storm. Back at the estate, Lucian's office had been cleared out. The once polished mahogany desk was empty, the monitors wiped, and silence filled the space where manipulation once breathed. Nia entered that room only once, to retrieve a single photo of Micah and Ayana together. It had been hidden in Lucian's drawer face down. She placed it upright on a new shelf in the family room, right where Micah could always see it. Caleb eventually asked her to stay. Not as an employee, not even as a partner, but as family. Nia didn't answer right away. She smiled faintly, touched his hand and said, "Let's just keep doing right by him. Titles can wait." Weeks passed. The world moved on. But something had changed, not just for Nia, but for others like her. Letters came in, messages from other maids, nurses, single mothers and widows, stories of defiance, of loss, of courage that found its breath because she dared to speak. Nia never asked to be the face of anything, but when the world turned its eyes toward her, she didn't flinch, she didn't stop, and she didn't need a title to be who she already was. The kind of woman who runs through hell in dish gloves if it means saving a life. No breaks, no permission, just purpose. Thank you for staying with us through this powerful journey. If Nia's story moved you, made you think, or stirred something in your heart, let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear where you're watching from and what part of the story stayed with you the most. And if you believe in courage without titles, in fighting for what's right even when the world stands against you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that matter. Until next time, stay brave, stay kind, and never underestimate the power of one voice.